It's a very creative life. I feel like we don't often think of science that way. We kind of think of it more as cut and dry, but the work we do is enormously creative. And I think that that's the denominator. Like, it's not so much how brilliant you are. I think you have to be creative. Like, if you're not creative, you're not going to do great things. Yeah, so I'm writing a book right now, and the book is called Artificial Intelligence and Industries of the Future. And it's not going to be a long book. It's about 120 pages, but it's not really a technical book. It's a book that any basically business executives can actually read, engineers can read. I think even the general public would be able to read if they're interested. And the book is all about how is AI, artificial intelligence, gonna influence all the companies and industrial sectors of the future, everything from 3D printing to quantum science, just all kinds of things, robotics, smart factories, self-driving cars. I mean, there's just so many different things that artificial intelligence is going to play a role in, and it's going to fundamentally change the way that we work. And so I'm trying to write a rigorous book on that, because I feel like there's a lot of speculation. It's the realm of science fiction, but it doesn't have to be. So as one very concrete example of where the science and the rigor comes in. So I often get this question from industrial people that I collaborate with, that, hey, we want to spend, let's say, $10 million on an artificial intelligence project, but how can we, like, is this a good bet for us? Like, is it something that will give us a return down the line? Because that's how corporations think, right? They need some kind of return or some expected return. And what is going to be the return on investment, the ROI on the AI project? And it turns out that that's a difficult question to answer, but there are certain ways to think about it. And so that's the kind of thing that the book goes into, that, how should you think about it? How do consulting firms think about it? So there are 2 to 3 lines of thought on this. One line of thought is that it will keep getting better, and so AI will, basically keep getting more powerful, and there will be a time when there will be a singularity. And so, that's a phrase that many have heard, that the AI will become so powerful that it becomes conscious, it becomes a new species. I mean, all of that is science fiction kind of, thought, right? But there's a possibility that it could happen. It's not the avenue that most people believe in, though, in the field. I don't think a lot of people believe in the singularity, to be honest. The second line of thought is that the AI will become more of a partner to humans. So this is what we call augmented AI. So the idea is that the human will still be in control, but the AI will take out the drudgery. Like, it will, like it kind of does spell checking for you right now, right? So that's a good example. It completes your sentences. It's gonna take out the work that you don't like to do, and so you will be able to focus on things that you like to do, that basically make us human. And then there's the view that it's really just a new technology. So this is kind of the most pessimistic view, perhaps, of AI, where it's just a new technology. It's like the word processor or the computer. So, it will transform the economy, but will not lead to, a lot of job losses or job gains, or on balance, things will be stable. And so that's kind of the more conservative view, that, the human society will not change drastically. It will incorporate the technology in pieces and will be robust to those changes. I tend to believe in the second view. I think that AI will have structural changes in society. The way we work, even what it means to be human, will change. But it won't become like this conscious entity and a new species like our overlords, a matrix style AI. I don't think we would get that. I think that is still more than 100 years away. Think about it as evolution, right? So in human evolution, right, we had the primates, and then we had a version of human beings that had, I think, half the brain size that we have now. And then at some point, like long time back, but not too long ago, in geological time, our brains doubled in size. And I think it's attributed to eating meat, and, there are all kinds of explanations for it. And then we became smarter, right? At some point, we discovered fire. At some point, we discovered, we invented tools, we started communicating. And then 10,000 years ago, we started building things. We had agrarian societies, then we had the pyramids, we had, all kinds of things. And now here we are, right? So we're still very much in that hierarchical way of being, and we still have the same brain sizes that we had tens of thousands of years ago. And so when we think about AI, what's the path for AI? Well, I would say there's the artificial narrow intelligence. This is, AI that can solve specific problems. So it can do face recognition. It does that very well. It can translate languages from one to the other. Google Translate can do that. It can even write poetry, like those kinds of things. But it's not very good. It's not very original still. Like it still feels like it's derived. Like it's the kind of thing that maybe a lit major, who is trying to do an assignment, and hoping to get away with, pretending to be creative perhaps. It's kind of at that level, like, good, competent, but not very inspiring, in terms of being creative. So that's ANI, artificial narrow intelligence. Then we'll have artificial general intelligence. So these are AIs that are more human-like. So they will be able to do a range of things that humans are able to do, not just one thing at a time, but a range of things. They'll be able to move, they'll be able to walk and talk, they'll be able to have common sense, they will be able to be creative, they'll be able to solve problems reasonably robustly, even if they haven't seen the problem before. So they'll have a range of general capabilities. And this is what is, I think, 70 to 80 years away still. And then you have the super intelligence, which is the better than human AI. So if the AGI, the artificial general intelligence, is 60 to 70 years away, I mean, I dare say it will happen in our lifetime, but the superhuman AI, it's still, I would say, a century away. Currently, the problems I work on are very much AGI problems. So I came up in my graduate school days solving ANI, artificial narrow intelligence problems. We were very much in the mindset that we have to try to solve one problem at a time and not think, get too ahead of ourselves, But now we are squarely in the era where we feel like we have crossed that boundary. We have been able to solve individual problems better than humans in most cases. We know how to do that. We have a blueprint for doing that in the general case. But we still don't have one AI that can do all of those things that a human being can do in a robust way, in a way that you can trust, that you feel like it's not voodoo, and you can actually treat it like a human being. And those are the kinds of projects I'm working on. That's what we're trying to make progress on. It's a very difficult challenge. So the most gratifying project I worked on was the DIG project. So it stands for Domain-Specific Insight Graphs. It was, in a nutshell, it was a project that was trying to do what Google did for the internet in specific problem domains. So the problem domain that we worked on was human trafficking. And, there's a lot of human trafficking is a very fast-growing organized crime sector. It's prominent both in developing nations and also in developed nations. So a lot of people think that it's not a problem in rich nations, but it turns out it is. And it's not just, a problem that comes in from the outside. It happens right within the borders, and we've seen case after case of that. So there's a lot of human trafficking that is still going on in the world. It's a tragedy. In general, people of all ethnicities, all backgrounds, all genders, we find them in this domain. And sometimes it's a case of someone running away or, very bad socioeconomic situations, abusive households. And so they're trying to really build up a life for themselves. And it doesn't help if law enforcement comes in and makes life even more difficult for them, because then they have to raise money for bail, and then they might end up getting trafficked because they owe money to someone, right, for that. And so what we have tried to do really in our work is to figure out who is genuinely being trafficked. And I think this is a very important point to make, because when I first described the work, the DIG work, people often mistake it as figuring out who's doing sex work. But in my work with social scientists, what I've learned is that when you're talking about sex work, it's a policy problem. So, you have to think about the policy implications. Like, do you want to expand the social safety net so that people who don't want to do this are not forced to do this in any way, especially by the socioeconomic circumstances. But it's quite another thing when you have another individual who is forcing you, literally, to do things that you don't want to do, has complete control over you, has bugged your phone, doesn't allow you to, eat or go to the restroom, or, it's a complete tragedy. I mean, it's appalling. It's not the kind of thing that ever goes away. Like when you first learn about it, I mean, it's appalling just to learn about it. and happens in all the big cities. And there's also a fair number of young people, minors, who are involved in this. So in my own work, I've been very passionate about trying to find child trafficking victims, because it turns out you don't then have to make the distinction. Like if you find child trafficking victims, they are protected under law. Whether they are doing it voluntarily or not simply does not matter, because you have an adult who is exploiting them, and we try to use our technology to find those victims, to rehabilitate them, to make sure that they still have a shot, at living a normal life, and have all the resources, and that the traffickers are prosecuted for this, and don't do this to other young people, who show up on the streets, who run away from home and then fall into the trap of these very sophisticated criminals, who can just make out. I mean, they have like handbooks, literally, like these people, to actually figure out how do you get children sucked into into that world, and it's just, so in our work, we not only deal with the AI, but, I make it a point to engage with everyone in the community to kind of say, okay, what are the limits of what we can do? And, what aren't we doing that we should be doing? So our system takes in a lot of data from the internet, and which is basically sex advertisements. So these are sex advertisements on the internet. And so what Dick would do is that it would take all these advertisements and would use artificial intelligence to read the advertisement. So, it would extract phone numbers, it would extract the names of these individuals, it would extract it would try to figure out, is there drug use going on? Is there more than one person involved in this service that they are offering? Are there risky sexual activities involved? Are they operating out of a hotel? Are they going to be coming to the customer's place? Like, what's going on there, right? So all of this, if you think about it, is not given to you. It's all in the advertisement. And so normally you would read the advertisement, and that's how you would figure out, what's going on. The AI takes in millions of advertisements. It reads all the advertisements. It takes all this information out, and then it makes it available to law enforcement in a search engine. And the search engine, we only give access to law enforcement, and it was very clear to us that they were interested in prosecuting traffickers. They were not interested in prosecuting sex workers. So this was something that was very important, I think, to us. We only came to appreciate its importance much later on. But initially, they were very clear with us that, hey, we want to find the traffickers, we want to rescue these individuals, and we are especially interested in children. So that's our main focus, that we want to rescue the children. And so what happens is that the AI, let's say that someone has gone missing, okay, and so you have some physical attributes of the person. Maybe the last phone number that they used, their family has filed a missing persons report. So, let's imagine that they have gotten sucked into this world. And so now the trafficker is advertising them, or they are advertising under a different name or a different phone number. But the AI might be able to actually find the pattern and would be able to give you a probability that, hey, there's a chance that this individual who just showed up in the ecosystem, in the search ads, is probably being trafficked. And here are the reasons why. And so the AI does not make any decision. It shows the law enforcement what it thinks, or it helps the law enforcement to search for probable trafficking victims. And at that point, law enforcement has to make its own decisions and has to go and, do some more digging, maybe go and read the ads themselves. So it's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack, right? So the AI kind of shows you a bunch of needles, and so you don't have to look at the whole haystack. And then you have to go through the needles, as a responsible law enforcement or NGO or what have you, right? Whoever the stakeholder is that's interested. And then they have to, look at all the data that they have available. They have to kind of balance the needs of who is very clearly a victim versus someone who might be a victim but might also be a voluntary sex worker. And, they have to make some pretty tough decisions, and then they go off on that, and usually they collate that with other data sets that they have access to, other agencies that they coordinate with. And then at some point, they gather the evidence, and if they're lucky, they're able to issue an arrest warrant and catch the trafficker. And there were some successful cases of that. I have met victims of human trafficking as a course of my work. So these were not victims who were rescued by DIG, necessarily, but they were victims of trafficking. And the way I met them was I was invited to a consortium that was organized nationally in Washington, D.C. So this was right before the pandemic. It was just when the pandemic was breaking out. So this was the Computing Community Consortium, the CCC, which is a well-known consortium in computing. They put out reports on important issues, and they bring the community together to debate on these issues. So this was an issue on how can we use AI to fight human trafficking. And we had this meeting in DC, and they had two victims of human trafficking come and give talks and talk about their experiences, and also talk about how dehumanizing it could be to always be talking about this. So that was also one of the things that we have to be very mindful of, that these are real victims, and they understand that people are very interested and have a genuine, compassionate interest in their story and would like to make things better. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that in a way we are getting them to relive their trauma whenever we get them to talk about this, over and over again. So that being said, we have to take their feedback and expertise when we are building these systems, but we need to be tactful. We can't, all go around asking them how their life, was shaped up in that when they were being trafficked, and to relive and, to provide details that might be too traumatic for them to go through. So I think that, that kind of shows you how complex the problem really is, because here in the community, scientists and more generally engineers, we tend to take a very objective view of this, so we kind of forget about the stories and the people and the real experiences, the lived experiences that people have had. And I think we need to bear that in mind. So in the work that we do, we don't look at everything just as a data point. We also try to look at, this is a valuable story, and what can we learn from this, without rehashing it, and trying to put this into our work in some way, right? That doesn't require rehashing over and over again. So that was a real eye-opener, and I think that we need more of that as we start building these complex systems in all domains, in healthcare, in finance, in all kinds of domains. We need to understand that we need to build more empathy. That's the word I'm looking for. We really need more empathy in collaborating with domain experts, subject matter experts, people who have actually lived through this, in a way that is very difficult to capture using numbers, right? And we don't want to turn everything into a number. So, one of the things that I try to tell my students and a lot of other people I work with is that the number it's a human invention as well. I mean, it's not like there's a 3 written in the sky. If you think about it, right, we can count lots of things. We have the mathematics for that, but it's not like numbers actually exist in nature, right? So, the numerical system, the arithmetic, right, these are all miracles of mathematics, and fairly modern miracles when we think about it. Calculus, for example, is really, Isaac Newton's invention in the last 300 years. And so a lot of things that we take for granted are human inventions. They are a good frame through which you can look at certain issues, but you can't look at every issue through a number and through data and through graphs. And so I think there is a place for qualitative research that is very much missing from a lot of traditional artificial intelligence. So I think that in the new era that we are moving in, I think a lot of younger people, the younger generation that is maybe aware of this, and we are trying to raise awareness, those of us who are in the field, to get people to have more empathy and to not look at everything as a number, and to not have this view that is something intrinsically superior about numbers. There's a story behind the number, that there's a way you derive the number, and what makes that more valuable or less valuable than a story, right? So it's a very different way of thinking about the issues. I think the AI scientist of the future is the classic liberal arts major of the past. I really do believe that. I mean, I think there are even folks who are saying that a liberal arts degree will become valuable again in the future. I mean, it's kind of lost its value a little bit, in the recent past, where a lot of people have made the claim, somewhat controversially, you might add, but the claim has been made in many circles that we should get everyone to study engineering, and we should get everyone to study science, and it's all about the STEM fields, and right? And all of that. And so what about the humanities and the social sciences and the liberal arts and the classics, right? And I think those are all going to be coming back because we're going to be discovering what it means to be human. I think we are now in a phase where we are actively asking the question, well, what really makes me human? And it's not our intelligence anymore. We used to think it was our intelligence, but it's not really our intelligence. The AI is becoming more and more intelligent. It can do a lot of things better than we can. I think it's only a matter of time when it's able to do a lot of things in one system, but it's becoming more and more intelligent. It's also starting to show signs of creativity. It's starting to create original works of art and poetry and so on. And there's still a little bit, derivative, but it's becoming more original. There's no question about it. And I think that's why we need the liberal arts. We need the liberal arts major to tell us what is it that makes us human. I think that it's what makes us human is ambiguity, which is a very strange answer. But I've come to appreciate ambiguity. I mean, everything from moral ambiguity to creative ambiguity. And what I really mean by that is we're not sure. I think as we go through life, we're not always sure, like, are we doing the right thing? And there's a lot of uncertainty. There's ambiguity in life. And there's something, and it's also about abstract experiences, so there's something in our emotional life, in our everyday experience as we go through life that makes us human. And so I'm trying to separate that from the intellectual life. So I think there's the intellectual life and then there's the emotional life. And there's always been a dichotomy between the two. But I think what we're starting to see is that perhaps there doesn't need to be. These are two different lives that coexist within one person. And it kind of comes back to the whole notion of numbers and stories as well, right? Like if you think about it, stories are really like our emotional life, and the numbers are more like an intellectual life, right? Like it's more mechanistic. And we've always thought about these things as very dichotomous, but it's not going to be like that. And so I think right now we're in the phase where the AI is doing very well intellectually, and there'll be a point where it will exceed us intellectually. And then we have to start asking ourselves that, okay, our emotional lives, is that also going to fall in the same way? Or is that unique? Is that what we have to hold on to? Our empathy and our emotional lives, our storytelling abilities, the spark of life that enables us to connect. I think we'll start having a greater appreciation of that as we move on. And we need the liberal artists and the people in those fields to remind us of that in rigorous ways. So I think the definition of a moonshot problem is actually in the name itself. And it's, when we think about the origins of moonshot, I don't know if this was the technical origin or not, but my view is that the word got very popular after Sputnik and with the whole space race, right? And so at the time it seemed very impossible that we would be able to send people out in space and, into the vast unknown. And this was when Star Trek, the original series, came around, and and Star Wars and all those, they were all taking off, right? The sci-fi was becoming very real. It started to seem much more real, that there are things that are possible that we didn't think were possible. And I think a moonshot problem is one where it seems impossible now, but it will become possible in the future. And we don't know how it will become possible. We don't have the answer. But we have this strong feeling that if we hit upon the right answer, it will become possible. I think with a regular research problem, the solution is a lot more clear. So there's some ambiguity. I mean, there's an old saying in research that if you know the answer already, then it's not research. Unfortunately, not everyone follows that advice. So sometimes you will have folks who know the answer to a question, and then they kind of do experiments that further support their answer. And so there are biases that creep in when this happens, and so on. And so there are all kinds of problems with that. But let's imagine you have a question. So a question might be, okay, is there water on Mars? Right? And this is a real question, right? I mean, either there's water or there isn't water. And you can kind of nuance it. I mean, you can ask, okay, is there water on Mars now? And where is the water? If there's no water now, was there water in the past, right? So these are very objective questions. And I think we know the answer now, but there was a time when we didn't know the answer, right? And so then you would have to design the experiment and send equipment or the rover or what have you. And then you would have to figure out what the answer is. Right? And then others may have to replicate the answer by doing the experiment again. So, normal research problems are kind of like that, but the experiments are much small scale. They're not that impactful. I think that it comes down to the question of impact, which is a qualitative notion. So, is this something that will really change human society? It's very difficult to put a number on this. Like, is this a research problem that will do that? I mean, there are extreme cases, like if I build a time traveling machine, like that's a moonshot problem on the surface. But I would argue no, because we don't really see a pathway to that at all. Like, we are completely stuck. Like, there's no, we don't even have a hypothesis at the moment on how we can build a time traveling machine. But we do have hypotheses on how do we build an AI that can be human like. I mean, there's a certain plan that is there. It might take 80 years for the plan to be put in action, but it's not totally impossible. It's not like we're stuck. We don't know what the timeline of progress is. We don't know if it's going to be 10 years or 80 years, but there is a route to that. And so that would be a moonshot problem, building an artificial general intelligence. But the time traveling, I would not say is a moonshot problem. I would still say that that's a sci-fi, that is still in the sci-fi realm. One day it may become a moonshot problem. I see myself as an enabler of moonshot. I think many of my colleagues are also enablers of moonshot problems. And in a way, it's almost, we almost don't have a choice in that. I think that we chose ISI probably because instinctively we felt that, I can certainly speak for myself, but I have a feeling this is also true for many of my colleagues, that we instinctively felt that this was an institution where moonshot was enabled, where moonshot was the norm, that you have to work on moonshot problems. And something attracted us to that. I think that there was something instinctive. We would not have been able to articulate it at that time. But I think it attracted us at a fundamental level. The culture is very much a moonshot culture. I mean, it's an institution that has been funded by the Department of Defense a great deal. It's been funded under DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is known for doing moonshot projects. And since we are funded under DARPA, in a way, we are almost obliged to work on moonshot problems. Now, by its definition, moonshot is very risky. It's a high risk, high reward proposition. So, once in a while we make a great deal of progress, like on the human trafficking work. There are other times where we make progress, but we haven't crossed the boundary that would make the moonshot possible. So there are problems that keep us up, at night, to use a proverbial phrase, where we're not sure that, when will the solution come to us. So I would like my work to be remembered for its grandness in a way. So I am not interested in small problems. So I hope that at the end of it, when it's all said and done, and when I'm ready to call it quits, which hopefully is many years from now, I mean, I do hope that people will look back on it and see it as an example of a grand vision that was not clear in the beginning, and so we're still working out the details as we go along, but we are very interested in these big problems, and I hope that the record will show that when my papers and my books kind of are seen together, that there will be a pattern that emerges, and hopefully along the way there will be a couple of pieces of great work that will truly stand the test of time, on the basis of scientific merit. And those are the problems that we secretly all want. I think that there are many people who don't admit that, but I think as scientists we secretly want that great piece of work, the theory of relativity kind of work, that Einstein and others have really come up with, right? So we want something like the theory of relativity to stay on our record, because when you discover something like that, it's none of the other stuff matters. And that's kind of what goes on your epitaph in a way. So that's kind of the dream. It is very ambiguous because I don't know if we will or if I will have that great piece of work. So, and here we have to define great, right? So great here can be defined in a number of ways. So, sure, we have done work and I've done work that I know has had a lot of impact. But when I really talk about a great piece of work, what I'm specifically referring to here is not so much something in the here and now, but something that changes the way we think about the field. And it's kind of the best example really is something like the theory of relativity, and in the arts, right? You have these great movies. I mean, like when you think about a movie like Psycho or Vertigo, right? I mean, it changed the field, right? It's not just that there aren't great movies. I mean, every year you have Oscars and there are a number of great movies that are awarded, but not every movie stands the test of time. Not every song is going to stand the test of time. Not every painting stands the test of time, and not every scientific work is going to stand the test of time. We don't want the mediocre work. We're not even interested in the Oscar really. That would be very nice to have. Very few people get it, so that's certainly a good thing to have. But if you ask me what the real dream is, the thing that is most uncertain, and that I think secretly all scientists want, whether they admit it or not, they really want that psycho moment. They want their movie and their scene to be remembered for hundreds of years, to be studied for hundreds of years, to really go down in history.